Good morning. Thank you for joining part 2 of the workshop, Envisioning a Transformed Clinical Trial Enterprise for 2030. Part 1 was held on January 26th, just a few weeks ago, and you can view the archived recordings and workshop materials on the workshop website. The link was shared with all participants either by email or you can find it in the workshop briefing book. This portion of the workshop is going to dive more deeply into discussing improving person-centeredness and inclusivity of the clinical trials enterprise. These topics were important before the events of this year. They're even more important today. All parts of this workshop are convened by a standing body at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, the Forum on Drug Discovery, Development, and Translation. The forum offers an ongoing neutral venue for stakeholders from across government, academia, industry, foundations, and consumer and patient groups to discuss and confront issues of mutual interest and concern. Through workshops and other activities, the forum brings together thought leaders to focus public attention on critical issues and areas and foster collaborative activity to understand and address these issues. In accordance with the National Academy's procedures, an independent planning committee organized this workshop. And there's a slide with the names of those committee members. And I want to just pause here and give a huge thanks to them. The planning process for this series of workshops, I think, was particularly challenging as we move from in-person to virtual. And we've just had a great committee and great work done. The bios for each member are in the briefing book and on the workshop webpage. I want to also thank the forum itself for their leadership and support and the vision and efforts to put this workshop together that were demonstrated by many people. Some comments about National Academy's workshops in general. While this is a standalone workshop and is not part of an ongoing consensus study by the National Academies, it is a starting off point for future activities related to the clinical trials enterprise. A summary of the presentations and discussions made during this workshop will be prepared by a rapporteur and will reflect what transpired at the workshop. It'll be prepared in accordance with institutional policy and made broadly available to the public. All views presented in the summary will be those of the workshop participants and attendees, and it will not contain findings or recommendations by the planning committee. The summary will be made broadly available. About the webcast and social media engagement, the National Academies has made huge strides in embracing social media, and I hope you will join us in taking these opportunities. Everyone can share their questions, comments, materials, or just introduce themselves in the Slack workspace that is dedicated for this workshop, Clinical Trials _2030. If you're new to Slack, it's an online discussion forum to ask questions and exchange ideas. You can find links to join Slack and instructions in the quick guide we posted on the workshop website or in the announcements by the Q&A box here on Zoom. For those participants in the Zoom meeting, please remember to keep your cameras off and your microphones muted unless we're in the breakout rooms. If you have a comment or question outside the breakout rooms, we invite you to add them to the conversation on Slack. Webcast attendees, you also have the option to enter your comments and questions in the Q&A box on the website under the webcast video window. Please note that if you're watching this webcast in full screen mode, the Q&A box will not be apparent, so you may want to shrink it a little bit. There are also hashtags for this work. Clinical Trials 2030, no spaces, and Drug Forum, no spaces. And we've also listed these on the slide, some slides. We highly encourage viewers to share their insights and observations about the workshop on social media using the hashtags. However, please note that only the comments submitted to either the Q&A box or via Slack can be incorporated into the summary of the workshop. I now want to pass the mic over to my cherished co-chair of these series, Esther Crofo from Faster Cures. Esther.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you and welcome to everyone again this morning. I'll continue a few logistics and then we'll dive right into the program for today. Since we are together for the next 4 hours, we will take a 45-minute break that will occur at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time following session 1. As Stephen mentioned, this workshop is being transcribed to aid in writing the summary. The transcription will not be made publicly available after the workshop, but staff will use it to aid in writing the workshop proceedings summary. Just a reminder again that you can enter your questions into a Q&A box under the webcast video or into Slack. There will be a slight delay because of the lag time given our virtual format. Video recordings and slides from today's workshop will be posted on the workshop website within approximately 1 week of the workshop. Throughout the day today, speakers will be introduced by affiliation and title only, but you can find their detailed bios as well as those of the members of the planning committee in the briefing book. As Stephen mentioned, this is the second of a 4-part workshop series. During our first workshop on January 26, we discussed the vision for a transformed clinical trials enterprise in 2030 and the challenges and the opportunities that are emerging on the 3 goals that we outlined: person-centeredness and inclusivity, building resilience and transparency, and integrating new technologies. Today, we're going to focus much more so on a person-centered and inclusive clinical trials enterprise. When we had this discussion on January 26th, a lot of the participants and the speakers mentioned a few themes that I will go through now. 1, a vision for greater community engagement and greater investment in diverse communities, moving the trials closer to where patients are and where trust is achieved. We discussed clinical trials that are co-designed with participants, that it's relevant for both the investigator as well as the participant. A more diverse clinical investigator workforce with a strong pipeline. The ability to measure and define success when we talk about more person-centered and more inclusive, how do we measure that we've achieved that? We discussed a system that better aligns clinical care and clinical trials, particularly in community-based settings, moving not just into greater academic research institutions, but bringing clinical trials closer to individuals where they live. And the recording from those discussions and the event materials can be found on the workshop website. We had a fantastic kickoff with Dr. Terrace King, so I encourage all of you to go back and watch that if you have not. So as I mentioned, today we're going to talk much more deeply about how do we move toward a more person-centered and inclusive clinical trial enterprise, and how do we engage public and other partners in this effort. We'll discuss short-term practical goals that will get us from where we need to be in the next 5 years and then also in the next 10 years.